Okay, video 2 of 4. For this one, baby heading, we're going to identify the conditionals in a biconditional. So, in other words, instead of you being given a conditional statement, figuring out its converse, and then putting it as a biconditional, you're going to be giving a biconditional to write the two if-then statements. So, the directions are pretty simple. What are the two conditional statements that form this biconditional? So, the example that we're looking at is a ray is an angle bisector if and only if it divides an angle into two congruent angles. Well, we know the definition of a biconditional, the sentence has to include if and only if. Does the sentence include if and only if? Well, by golly, it does. Okay, ooh, that's not a very good box, but anyway. So, if and only if. Now, to figure out your statements, your two statements are going to be on the left and the right of that biconditional. So, the first statement that you're talking about is a ray is an angle bisector. Okay? The second statement that you were talking about is it divides an angle into two congruent angles. Now, you can think of this however you want to. You can say that a ray is an angle bisector is your hypothesis, and it divides an angle into two congruent angles is your conclusion. And let's get to writing. So, hypothesis, conclusion, if then, that needs to be a conditional. So, our conditional statement is if an array is an angle bisector, then it divides an angle into two congruent angles. So, all we did was take biconditional, kind of kick out if and only if, and throw in if then. Now, that's the conditional. Why this is not labeled conditional, it should be, so you know. Okay, and then the second sentence you could do, which we would consider the converse, is if a ray divides an angle into two congruent angles, then it is an angle bisector. So those are the two sentences you can get. Now you can get the number 2 and write it first, and then write number 1 second, and I'm fine with that because those are still the two sentences you get from that biconditional, regardless of the order that you write your answers in. Okay, so look at example number 2. You need to pause and try this one on your own. Just like I said, in class, you wouldn't just sit there, twiddle your thumbs, not even pay attention to me, watch TV, watch YouTube. I don't know what you do when you're supposed to be doing work, but try example 2. Okay, so by now you should have done example 2. Two numbers are reciprocals if and only if their product is 1. Alright, so again we have our if and only if. The first part of that statement, two numbers are reciprocals. The second part of that statement is their product is 1. So when you go to write your two sentences, the first way you can write it is if two numbers are reciprocals, then their product is 1. The second way, if the product of two numbers is 1, then the numbers are reciprocals. Now remember, whenever you break down a biconditional, biconditionals use if and only if. Conditional statements have to have the if then. So make sure when you break down a if and only if, you break down into an if then. That's all for video 2, so move on to video 3.